But anyway, I just wanted to talk about the unstable genius, which is of course Donald Trump. And I found out this morning that this very stable genius is in fact wanting to call in the Marines. He's threatened Gavin Newsom with prison time, which is pretty amazing. A sitting president is threatening the the governor of California because of the protests in LA, which for the most part, right, there is some violence, but for the very most part, oh, One Love is vegans. I love what you keep doing. Keep up with the good work. Thank you, One Love vegans. Yep, yep. Thank you so much. But yeah, I was just shocked at him saying that. But then I was initially shocked, and then I was like, yeah, that's Donald Trump, and it's been so normalized, the crazy stuff that he says. But he's calling it an insurrection. He wants to imprison Gavin Newsom, right? For protests which are mostly peaceful, right? And January 6th, right? I mean, it's like in the MAGA movement, it doesn't exist. Like, it's like they want you to forget about it. Yeah, that's Trump, but he's going too far. Yes. The bathroom guy, greetings, everyone, peace and meta to all. Wow. Thank you, bathrobe guy, sorry. And then, yes. And then basically, he's doing this sort of stuff. And every day I just think, how is it possible that the MAGA movement doesn't see what he's doing? I mean, on the one hand, right? Hey, Craig, how you going? Good to see you again. We had a chat the other day. But yeah, basically, it's just getting worse and worse all the time, and the hypocrisy is crazy. Like, why would you put Gavin Newsom, a governor, in jail, right? Because there's protests happening in that city, right? Namaste. Yes, thank you. And hey, man, I saw you're on. Thanks, Craig. Thank you. And then yeah, and I was thinking, why is it possible that he's just allowed to say stuff like that, and then nothing, like, nothing happens to it. Like, could you imagine Joe Biden, right, or Kamala Harris saying that there were protests, right, protests in some state, right, over something that had nothing to do with anything, right, and then they said, well, we should arrest that governor or that state. Like, it's insane. You just never do that. It's also like hypocrisy because Donald Trump on January 6th, basically, that was actually an insurrection, right? What's happening in California is an insurrection. But what we saw in January 6th, an insurrection, and Donald Trump has downplayed what happened there. He also basically pardoned pretty much everyone, including the many of the violent ones. There were 141 police officers who were assaulted on January 6th, and he called them patriots. And he spent 2 months leading up to that, saying to these people, the little peanut brains of the MAGA people, and this is what he kept saying over and over again 2 months before January 6th. He said, you have to fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you won't have a country. That is such a serious thing for a president to say to a base that is like very cultish, right? He's telling them that if they don't fight like hell about the election being stolen, yeah, Trump called January 6th a day of love and referred to the insurrectionists as patriots. That's right, Sarah. Could you imagine? If, like, Gavin Newsom, like, if something like that had happened, right? In connection to I could say, yeah, Sarah. Trump incites the insurrection. He did incite the insurrection, and they all did drink the Kool-Aid as well. Absolutely drank the Kool-Aid, and he did incite it because people often say, you hear this all the time from MAGA and Trump and all the MAGA media, is they say he said to protest peacefully, right, and calmly, and he basically said that, right. So patriotically and peacefully. That's what he said. Protest that. Now, this is the constant thing that they use to excuse Trump or what happened on January 6th. Here's the actual reality of it. They don't give you the big picture. They make it sound like it started on January 6th. Trump saying about the election being stolen. They want you to believe that that's all it was. They don't want they don't want people to know that there was 2 months before then, right, where he told the same people that you have to fight like hell. You're not going to. He wasn't telling them peacefully for 2 months before. He was just telling them to fight like hell, or you're not going to have a country. You're telling some of the most bizarre people, some of the most craziest people, they're not going to have a country. That's really extreme. So the natural progression of telling some people that for 2 months and then saying that Mike Pence has to do the right thing, right? And then he throws in once, peacefully and patriotically. It's insane. If someone tells you for 2 months, right, that you need to kill this person or you need to do this, and you get brainwashed into that, and at the end of it, they say something like peacefully, they're not listening to that. They're listening to the last 2 months, right? They're listening to when he says that Mike Pence is not doing the right thing, right? That's what they're listening to. But just because he said that one line, they think that gives an out. And they repeat that over and over again, right? But he said peacefully and patriotically. Yeah, okay. So that's the big lie that that MAGA media say. You hear it all the time from Tucker Carlson, right? You hear it all the time on Fox News. He said peacefully and patriotically, right? And they just repeat that over and over again. And to their base, Patricia, Trump is guilty as sin as an insurrectionist. This is his second chance. He's a psychopath and manipulative of uneducated and secure people. Yeah, there's no doubt that all the evidence shows is that Trump supporters, many of them, are less educated, but also less informed about what's going on in the country, like politically. They're not very informed. They're not. So what they showed is a couple of months after they did the election, they had the election last year. The New York Times did some polling and found that a lot of people who voted for Trump were less informed, and most of the people who voted for Democrats were more informed, which makes sense because if you saw Trump being Trump in 2024 and you were informed about what was happening every day, you can't possibly, or you can, but most people would have gone, maybe not. But they weren't. They weren't paying attention. And so that's how we got those people. So getting more people informed in America about about politics and getting them more engaged is a very good way of people moving against Trump, Craig. And whether he said it or not, they were not peaceful. He had no right to pardon. That's right. Exactly, Craig. Because back then, yeah, because even if he didn't say that, even if just say he'd been saying peacefully all the time, Craig, you're exactly right. He didn't have to pardon them, like when he got into power. And what's interesting is he pardoned people who attacked police officers, not the people who sort of got who came in, whatever. He pardoned people who attacked police officers, and now he's saying all the time, right? Basically, he's now constantly saying that the police, that the reason he's taking on all this action in Los Angeles is because he's all about law and order. I mean, it's just like the insanity. It's all about law and order. And he said something like, if a protester spits at a police officer, they should be hit. Now, the January 6th police officers were more than spatter. They were beaten up. Some people, with a fire hydrant, all that stuff. And it was really quite severe. And on top of that, they're chanting "Hang Mike Pence" while he's still in the building. There's a difference between chanting "Hang Mike Pence" when you're at home in your bedroom, right? Then chanting "Hang Mike Pence" when you're actually in the same building as he is in. So again, the sheer hypocrisy of this, and the fact that I feel like Trump and the people around him, they feel they can get away with these things. They feel like they know. I kind of feel like they do know some of the American electorate. No, I'm talking about us, like people like you, not me, but people like Americans. I'm talking about people who aren't paying attention, because that's the only reason I feel he thinks he can get away with it. Because how can you say this is all, I want to send in the Marines and all that because of law and order, and then have January 6th just a couple of months ago with the pardons? You have to think that the only reason they would say that is because they have no respect for the people that voted for him. No respect at all. Patricia, because they have gotten away with it. Absolutely. It's all such mind emotional manipulation, straight up fascism all day. Absolutely. I think, Sarah, back in 2020, Trump didn't condemn white supremacist groups and their role in violence in some American cities. calling it solely a left-wing problem and telling far-right extreme. That's right. And that's a good point, Sarah, because they basically, anything that happens like on the left that's violent, it's like left-wing radicals, you know, they're violent radicals. Anything that happens on the right, it's like, it's the FBI. It was, basically as a psyop, you know, they were FBI. All of them were actually encouraged by the FBI to do it. The Tucker Carlson conspiracy theories. Um, One Love Vegans. Dear Joe, hope this will not affect the crypto space. Oh, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. The crypto space. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if any of this is actually is actually going to affect his popularity. His popularity is definitely going down. But if you actually look, so it went down a couple of months ago, and now it's slightly ticked up again, which is unusual because I thought it would go down and down and down to the midterms, and he's definitely very unpopular. But he's more, when you look at what he's doing, his popularity is still way higher than I feel it should be for someone that is doing what he's doing. And that's the thing. Like, and I think the other thing is they always have, MAGA always have two things. Like, for example, with Elon Musk, right? If Elon Musk, you basically had a few people who went out and vandalized his car, right? So they went out, vandalized his car, all that. But now I'm not for vandalizing people's cars or anything like that. But they made it out like it was terrorism. Like, they literally said it was terrorism, right? And they love exaggerating that. But anything on their side, Sarah, MAGA loves to hear all that garbage about radicals on the left and only the libs. It's a weird kind of macho power play. Yeah. Patricia, now he wants anybody who disagrees with him about anything, like Caligula and Mussolini had a baby. Yeah, exactly. Because I think a lot of the people, he does generally have a more male orientated audience, or fan base. Obviously, more males vote for him. They like him, especially I think younger males are attracted to him. So I think that's true, and I think that sort of, and they play into that. I mean, just on the weekend he was at the UFC. I mean, I've got nothing against the UFC if that's what you want to do. Thank you for the love hearts with that. But yeah, he does play into that sort of, and I think that's also part of him trying to be that strong man. He's like a strongman person, like like a Viktor Orban from Hungary, that sort of thing. Like, he does. I think he does want to be an authoritarian, but I don't think he wants to be an authoritarian like Hitler. I think he wants to be an authoritarian like, for example, like Viktor Orban from Hungary, where he can still pretend that it's not authoritarian. So it's like gradual thing like that, and then still keep parts of a democracy there, just to give him sort of a bit of cover. And that's I think that's the way that he's going to try to approach this. I think he's sending in all this stuff about sending in the National Guard and all that. I think this is happening as a test. Everything I've noticed that he's done since he got elected is like a test. The Supreme Court, the courts, let's see how far we can go, right? And then they pull back a little bit, but then they go back forwards. It's like they're testing to see how far they can push into democracy. The same with this. Let's send in some Marines. Let's send the National Guard. And then they're just testing every single area they can to see how far they can push. And then I think eventually they will start ignoring the courts. But they've already put in place a story to tell to their base or to the American people who aren't paying attention about that. And that is, nobody elected the judges. We got elected, Craig. Well, it's all illegal, so it's a matter of how long they can get away with it before it gets overturned. Yeah, exactly. Sarah, LA is absolutely a test because he wants to do the same nationwide. Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if he gets away with it in LA, right, he'll then, and the thing is, Marty, hey Joe from Charleston, South Carolina, I agree, he's always testing. Yeah. It's easier to test in blue states because you can't lose any. For him, he can't lose anything in California. He can't lose anything in New York because they're not going to vote for him anyway. So test him in the blue states where he can't really lose, right? And then if it works there, then he can maybe start testing him into the red states as well. Um, and I think that's part of his doing. If he ignores the courts, I mean, that's essentially going, now you're getting rid of, the checks and balances if you start actually ignoring the Supreme Court. Um, I don't know how far he'll push that, but I think he will push that. But I think that it just, I always watch Fox News to see, because I know that what's coming from the Trump administration is being fed to Fox News, Newsmax, and UIM. And they're repeating over and over again, if they've listened to the arsehole for 2 minutes and didn't feel physically ill, I can only consider, for them. Patricia, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I just think that a lot of people, I think they're attracted to him, right? Yeah, he's a psychopathic. Yeah, I think they're attracted to him because I think there's never been a political party in America that represented assholes. Do you know what I mean? Like people who are assholes. Like generally, the Democrats would represent working class people. Republicans would represent more affluent people, all that stuff. So there was like a mixture of different demographics. Maybe younger people generally voted. Younger people generally voted Democrats than Republicans. Older. So there was all this sort of stuff. But yeah, it's party of ourselves. But nobody ever thought, why don't we get our core demographic to be assholes? Nobody thought that. And I think in a way, that's what they are. I feel this is a party for assholes, because before assholes were kind of like a homeless political party, right? I mean, yeah, I feel like the Republicans in the past have been assholes, but they've always tried to mask it a little bit. Do you know what I mean? They've always tried to mask it a little bit more than what Trump does. Trump just comes out. I remember when he was making fun of that guy with a disability. You remember that? Or that, like, they weren't really doing that in the Republican Party before. Yes, they invaded Iraq and all that stuff. That was pretty bad. But they always tried to pretend like there was weapons of mass destruction. There was something, they gave an excuse for it, right? They always tried to cover it up. With Trump, it's like all out there. He's not trying to hide back. He's like, yeah, I'm an asshole. And a lot of people are like, you know what? We've been ignored for so many years, the assholes, right? Nobody has ever campaigned just towards us assholes. And I think that's how they're winning. They're winning the asshole vote. And now we know that about 30%, I think it's 30% of Americans who voted for Donald Trump are assholes. And now we know that. So I think there would have been a smaller percentage that maybe got him across the line, that maybe voted for him, not because they're assholes, but maybe because they don't follow politics on a regular basis, and they're sort of like worried about, they blame Biden for the inflation. There's a lot of stuff about the economy. Maybe they're not maybe assholes, they're just uninformed, And some of those people were even saying things like, I don't really like Trump, but they fell for the whole he's good with the economy stuff. So I'll put them aside, because I think they'll probably come back the other way. But yeah, there's a core base of the Republicans who are just, they are, or they wouldn't vote for a woman. That's right. Yeah. And I think that's the core base of their argument. But I'd never hear, but it would be hard for the New York Times or a polling company, right, to I don't know how you would poll that. The GOP have been assholes for a long time. I agree, Marnie, but I don't think they've been openly this asshole, right? They've definitely been assholes. Patricia, it's defined clearly in Mein Kampf. Pretty sure that's his playbook. If you look at it, talk, act, smell like an arsehole, you're an arsehole. Yeah. And also, I feel like, Craig, younger Bush did stuff for everyone, not just the people who voted for him. Yeah. At least they gave the illusion that, they were like, some people tried to make it out like compassionate conservatives. There was a bit of that. But what we're seeing now is completely different. Like, he will just, it's like he's trying to get these people. It's like in that party, right? The more of an arsehole, more Trump pretends to be, or basically he's an arsehole, the more the people think he's a strong man. Because, they will look at someone like Kamala or someone else and then go, they're too weak, right? They equivalate, they think there's an equivalency between being kind, right? Or, being a little bit more thinking about what you're going to say, be more careful about what you're going to say. You don't want to hurt people, that sort of stuff. And they think, oh, well, that person's not being genuine. That person's not being authentic. That person, yeah. And then Trump just comes out and says the most arsehole thing, and they're like, he's so authentic. He just says what's on his mind, and and they think that because they are also thinking the same things Trump does, and they also do the same. Yeah, in their primitive brains, they equate being an arsehole with being strong. Yeah, that's true, Sarah. Yeah, they do. I feel like it's like a strongman thing. Yeah, um, and often you'll hear them say, like with Putin, that like when they're talking about Putin, like and Trump, and they will say like, oh, could you imagine Kamala having to deal with Putin? She couldn't handle it because they see her as one female, but also, you know, she's careful about what she says, right? So in their little brains, peanut brains, they're like, well, she's too weak. And when Trump says the most crazy things, they're like, well, he's going to be better with Putin. Trump is a weak man's version of what a strong man. Yeah, exactly, Money. Sarah, I know people like that. They lack empathy just like their dear leader. Yeah. And I think what's interesting, about the whole thing about um, Kamala not being as strong as Trump to deal with someone like Putin is that during the debate with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, she basically dog walked him through that whole thing. Patricia, GOP has bastardized the definition of conservatives. They have warped it, accommodate their furious. Yeah, I think this is definitely not the normal conservative party. It's definitely the MAGA party now. But yeah, they basically during the debate, she basically started talking about crowd sizes, right? And she basically baited him during the debate. And she did it on purpose because she knew he would lose his mind, right? So all it took was for Kamala to bait him, right? To lose his mind was going, oh, your crowd sizes are as big as you think they are. And then he just lost it, right? That was a bait. That was done on purpose. Now, if he's that easy to manipulate, right, in a debate about crowd sizes, why would you want that guy representing you against Putin or any other like Xi Jinping or whatever it is? That guy got dog walked just by saying the most bait, just criticizing his crowd size. So if anybody you're going to trust, it's the person who manipulated Trump into falling into that trap, right? And that was Kamala, right? And she did it so easily during that debate. And so I think it's the actual opposite because I don't know the relationship between him and Putin. I think there's something else going on. I don't know what it is. But, let's just say, Marnie, the American electorate has rejected a woman twice to give to an old felon fascist. Extremely sad commentary on American society. Yeah. Yeah. And, they react on emotion instead of logic. That's right, Craig. Yeah. And they do. It's all emotional to them. They basically, they see Trump as a representation of themselves. I think a lot of these Trump supporters, if you saw them at home talking to their friends or their work colleagues or their family, you would see a similar version of Trump. And he makes them feel better about themselves, right? He makes them think, well, look, I'm an asshole. The president's an asshole. So it's okay to be an asshole. And I think he did, and then you see, unfortunately, a little bit on the left, they start saying things like, for example, we need to be less woke. We need to be, we need to be a little bit more edgy. We need to, so yeah, Trump validates them. That's right. So I don't want, we need to find the Joe Rogan of the left. Remember all that happened, and the Democrats spent like millions of dollars trying to find a Joe. No, you don't. That's not how you get a Joe Rogan of the left, by manufacturing that, right? You can't manufacture a Joe Rogan on the left. It has to happen organically. And secondly, why would you want a Joe Rogan of the left who is anti-vax, who's anti-science, right? Who kind of, in a way, encapsulates the asshole Trump supporter in some ways, not in all ways, in some ways. And he's, and even though he criticizes sometimes things that Trump does, and he wasn't always like that, I think that's not what you should aspire for. I personally think that the best thing the Democrats can do, right, this is the problem when when people lose elections, especially against someone like Trump, they start to internalize so much, right? And they start to really, they just have like a meltdown, and they're not thinking properly, because it's like the end of a relationship, right? Or something just happened. And for the first couple of days or weeks, you're in shock and you say stuff, you think stuff, and you go, oh my God, how do we lose this? Oh my God, it's because Kamala didn't go on Joe Rogan's podcast. It's because, you know, Trump, was better with the guys on YouTube and all that stuff. So Democrats were starting, and in a way, that's a good thing, because when Trump lost, all they said was it was stolen. So I'd rather Democrats go, okay, well, we lost this. Let's find out what happened, right? So that's kind of a better thing to do than pretend like, it was stolen. So I get that, but it's now like months and months afterwards, and some of them are still talking about, trying to become more Trumpian, more edgy, more this, more that. I just don't think you need to do that, because I think Trump won for a variety of reasons, right? And I don't think it was because of those. That was what got his base out, but it's not, I think, what got him, what made him win. I think if inflation hadn't happened in 2024, his chances of winning would have been much less, much slimmer, because we all know, it's all been said 100 times, that inflation affected elections all over the world. So I think Democrats overreact, right? Of course, you understand why they're reacting, but don't overreact to the point where you create someone, or you get someone who's not equivalent to him, but, a little bit like him. Because in 4 years' time, there could be a completely different electorate, and Trump could be completely on the nose with everyone, right? Really, really hated, right? And then suddenly you've now put someone forward who's a little bit Trumpian, right? And they're like, we don't want anyone who's even similar to Trump. And so you've got to be careful that 4 years out, you're already trying to pick people in the media or that who are going to who you think, right, is going to get you a win then, because things could look I don't think anybody in 2020, after January 6th and Donald Trump, if you spoke to anyone there, including Fox News, including JD Vance, including a lot of people in the Republican Party, a couple of weeks after January 6th, if you said to any of those people, Donald Trump was going to run again, and not only was he going to run again, he was going to win, no one would believe that, including JD Vance, according like America's Hitler back then, Craig. Republicans tied up in Congress in 2023 and did absolutely nothing but investigate Biden. So all good stuff he did basically got stopped. Yeah. And that's interesting, Craig, because the other thing is, right, they all often talk about like Russiagate, the whole Mueller report thing. And they will often, they're obsessed with that. And it's always like that Rogan area and stuff like that. It's like, oh, the Russiagate, the hoax and all that. Well, a lot of times they don't actually talk about Joe Biden being investigated, right? Investigated by the Congress, by the Republican Congress, and including an impeachment inquiry, right? And they found for the connection between Hunter Biden and himself, and they found nothing, absolutely nothing, right? No evidence that there was any connection that Joe Biden, right, was helping his son. None at all in terms of like corruption, anything like that. So there was no there. But they still talk about Russiagate or the Mueller report, right, which happened in 2017 and 16. They still talk about that like it happened yesterday, right? So again, you can't investigate Joe Biden and his relationship to his son, and then nothing happens, and then pretend like, okay, it's only the Democrats who are doing that as well. But yeah, again, it's a lot of this stuff I think is coming from the fact that Republicans are really, really, they're really, really trying. They can't get away from Trump. I do think that there are some Republicans in Congress who would love to get away from Trump, but that's never going to happen unless his ratings or his polling goes down a lot. And at the moment, they're going down, but they're not going down by a lot. And eventually, the Democrats are going to have to come up with a leader, and that leader, unfortunately, is going to have to appeal to the Rust Belt state, the southern states, because that's the only way they can win. They can't win with just like Liberal seat. They have to win the Rust Belt states. And that's why I've always thought that the approach that countries like Australia did is where, unfortunately, you put away the culture wars. You put away, like, for example, let's just assume that Trump would run again, right, in at the next election, right? You can't. What we now know after 2024 is that attacking Donald Trump himself and all the indictments, the GOP had the chance to be done with Trump and they squandered it. Yeah, they did. I still don't know how it's when I think about it, I think of January 6th and I think of all these people like Fox News coming out going, no, no. How is it possible that within 4 years he was able to not just become the leader, but win? Anyway, that's, I mean, that's like the memory. I think some of it is people, like, I'm not talking about the MAGA base, but some of the other people who voted for him, is that they have short-term memory, right? And they remember, all they remember is um, the the economy was doing well when he first got in power, but that was because Obama, he inherited a good economy from Obama. But as soon as he had to fight, yeah, it shows that Trump is yeah. But as soon as he had to fight, right, to save the economy when COVID happened, he stuffed it up, right? Mount Marnie, it just makes his base more dug in when you go after the orange. Yeah, it does. And they go on about Trump derangement syndrome. It's like constantly, they just, if you, like, it shows that Trump was a symptom of a larger issue. Yeah, I agree, because you can't have Trump in Australia, right? He wouldn't exist here. You could have a Trump in Australia, but he wouldn't win. So how? So now you have to think about what was happening in America to allow Trump, right, to win, not just once but twice. What was going on there? Because you can't put Trump in another country and it wouldn't work. So there has to be something happening unique in America. That he put like 25% of the debt in the first year. That's right, Craig. And basically, I think what it is in America has a very different, in terms of Western countries, has a very different outlook to a lot of our countries. Fox News and other right-wing media, yeah, a massive psychological operation. Yeah, you also, that's true, because in America, your right-wing media is much bigger than here. We do have right-wing media. The person who owns Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, wasn't Australian. Well, he talks like an Aussie because he spent most of his life here, and he still has newspapers in Australia. And now he went to America, became an American citizen. Now he owns Fox News and all that. But he's a big part of the problem, right? He's a big part of the problem. But he tried to create, right, a similar thing to Fox News in Australia called Sky News, right? And you might have heard of that from England and stuff like that. But this is like at night after 6 o'clock, we call it Sky News After Dark because it becomes really weird. Like during the day, right? Rupert Murdoch is yours. Yeah, he is. No, Craig, he was ours because he's now American citizen. So he's now yours. He belongs to you. But he still does, he still has a lot of sway in Australia, but nowhere near as much as he thinks he does. And he's getting less and less of it because he owns a lot of print newspapers here and nobody reads print newspapers anymore. So he had a lot more power before print newspapers, when everyone was reading papers and stuff. So his power's diminished a lot. Even like 10, 15 years ago, both leaders, both leaders from both parties would go and talk to Rupert Murdoch. This is true. Like before the election, they go to have a visit with him, and basically to suck up to him, to sort of like say he doesn't push too much anti-left propaganda with him, right? So he did have a lot of power here as well. And the show that he's got, Sky News, during the day it's normal, and then after 6 it's all opinion. Like, and it basically is an Australian version of Fox News, literally almost identical. In fact, during the COVID lockdowns, when Australia was a big focus of Rogan and all that sort of people, Rogan was constantly retweeting or reposting videos from Fox News After Dark, right? Because it was an Australian thing. They were more skeptical of the lockdowns and stuff, right? So basically he tried to do it here, but their audiences are tiny, really, really small, right? They get a bit more audience when they repost it on YouTube and stuff, but nowhere near like Fox News. So we don't have that constant, there's no OAN, there's no Newsmax, right? So we're not overawed with with propaganda coming from Fox News and places like that. So that makes it a lot easier for people to understand. But I also think it's because Fox News After Dark didn't really work in Australia, is because people in Australia, we're not big on cable TV. Cable TV, we have it, but it's not a big thing. Uber wealthy people controlling these platforms is a disaster for us. Yeah, Melissa, it is. And, of course, you know, the interesting thing about Fox News is that they're representing wealthy people, but their base who watch them are working class people. So this has always been a thing with right wing people where they represent rich people, but they try. But a lot of working class people actually are attracted to what they say. And I noticed that in Australia for years. Aussies are smarter, and I say that as an American, Marty. Yeah, I mean we're definitely like we do stupid stuff here. We're far from perfect. But we, I think, I think, as I said before, and people here have heard me before, I think having, um, compulsory voting is a big thing, and I've said it before, and it's not again for people out there. Sometimes when I was, people who listen to this in America, they're like, "I don't want the government telling me what to do." It's not, you don't go to jail. It's just a small fine, and you can get out of it by just emailing and saying I was sick. So it's basically nothing. But it's created a culture where everybody votes, and so you don't just get the extremes on the end. And if you grow up thinking in schools and everything that you have to vote, to civic duty to vote, then you become more informed because you know that you're going to vote every 4 years. Actually, every couple of years you vote for your state premier, like someone in your state. So you're voting once every couple of years for either a state person. That was going to be my question. How much do you guys watch TV, Craig? Um, Not a lot. I would say it's very similar to America. Yeah. Um, in terms of, we don't watch a lot of mainstream stuff. Mostly younger people under 40, I reckon, watch mostly online, either on Facebook, TikTok, some streaming service, all that. We have that problem as well where people aren't watching as much just like everyday news. Um, Most of the people who watch mainstream news in Australia are older people. Um, but the news organizations do is they then repost it on YouTube, and so that they get more views on YouTube, or gets reposted onto TikTok, so people see it on TikTok. So they are getting bigger audiences than people imagine, because when they tell you the ratings, they're only telling you the people who are watching it live. They're not telling you the people who are watching it when it's been shared on social media. Um, so I think part of the reason is that the news that we do have in Australia is not. We don't have the Fox News. We don't have all that, and people aren't attracted to cable news. They're just not attracted to cable news. The most of the news that people watch in Australia is just like on free to air. Like I don't know, like your ABC News in America, not like CNN. When people we're not into that thing on cable news. It doesn't matter whether it's CNN or Fox News, where you have like four different people and they're like yelling at each other. That's not a big thing in Australia. Like I don't feel like that's a really good thing, like a positive thing. So yeah, so I think that helps, but making everybody vote. But the reason why that doesn't work in Australia here is because Fox News can't get enough people to watch it, right? So there's enough people in Australia to see through it. Are your elections publicly funded in Australia? Yeah, they are, but you can. So they are publicly funded, but you can't. Parties can get donations, but if you're a big business, right, there's a cap on that donation. So you can't just you can't give a political party $1 million, right? But it's capped at a certain amount. The Labor Party, which is the centre left party here, will generally gets a lot of money from the unions because they're close to the union movement here. Because the Labor Party originally came from the union movement, and the centre right party will generally get more money from business and things like that. Although over the years they've become much more similar, right? So they've kind of grown towards the centre. They're not exactly the same, but they used to, like 30, 40 years ago, the Labor Party, the left wing party, was way more to the left, and it's now become sort of more business friendly, all that sort of stuff. So there is a difference, definitely a difference, but it's not like it's not massive, yeah. But again, it's the way you don't get, and also we don't have those elections that go for 6 months. Like they seem to go for like a year in America beforehand. And it's like you're exhausted by the time you get to the end. They generally they'll generally start like 2 months out beforehand, and they start very slowly, right? And so and you're not saturated with constant things. So yeah, I think people in Australia, and they're not when we see Trump in America, we're obsessed with that. Like I'm obsessed with American politics, but I'm obsessed with it in the same way as you're just seeing something tragic happen. You can't keep your eyes off it. 2 years they will start right up. 2 years they'll start right after midterms. Yeah, I think we look at America and we we feel sorry for the left wing, or the people who didn't vote for Trump, and we just don't understand how he got into power. We really don't understand. I can actually understand 2016 more than 2020 because he was a new person, right? He was a new figure. There was a lot of people who were like, "Let's blow up the system," whatever, bang, bang, bang. I I don't understand why people voted, but I can understand it more than two. But then after we don't understand, yeah, I know, but I don't understand how you could see him for 4 years, then January 6th, and then you go, yeah, I think I'm going to vote for him again. I just that is much harder for me to understand. The second time is much harder for me to understand. Yeah, because you now have agreed, Melissa. Yeah, again, because we now know who he is, and I got to say he's way worse this time than last time, right? Because the first time before January 6th, I sure don't understand either. Yeah, I think the second time there were so many factors that went into it. Like one was post-COVID inflation. I think definitely helped him, right? I think Biden's decline probably helped him a bit. Yeah. I think the Democrats not having enough time to sort of, do a normal campaign helped him a little bit. He had a lot of things going in his way. And one of the biggest things that I think helped him as well, besides all that, the economy and all that, is since COVID, Trump said he loves low information voters. That is not well-informed people. So that explains part of it. Yeah. And as I said, Sarah, the polling showed that they were the people who voted for him the most, and the most informed didn't. So Trump is really good at getting eyeballs from people who don't follow politics, right? Because he says crazy. When Trump says they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, that doesn't just go to people who follow politics. That goes to people who are on TikTok or streaming. So everybody's hearing that, right? You don't have to be a political person to hear that. Then, right? And then you hear that, right? And then you might also hear him say, it's a witch hunt. They're all trying to stop me and stuff like that. I think Trump portrayed himself somehow, but I do think he was successful because I think in 2016 he ran as an outsider, and it's very hard to run as an outsider twice because you've been the insider, right? But because there was that gap of 4 years where the Democrats were in power, and because I think there was people's memories are really short, he somehow managed to convince enough Americans that he was again the outsider, even though he'd been in power for 4 years, right? And I think he did that because of the 4 year gap, but I think he also did that because he tried to he painted himself as the outsider, right? And I actually remember somebody in Australia who also follows a little bit of politics, but not as much, nowhere near as enough. And he said to me, and I hear this in America as well. He said to me, why do they keep going after Trump? Why are they trying to stop him from running? What is it about him? Are they scared that he's going to expose something? And I thought, what do you mean? Like those indictments against him are real indictments. Like he was hiding documents, right? Like that's the other thing. But that's what I mean by like Sarah said, like low informed voters, is that none of these people are looking at that document case and looking at the details. Well, you know what they're looking at? They're looking at Biden did the same thing, Trump did the same thing. And the detail of Biden found it, or his lawyers found it and said, look, what can we do to fix this up? And they said, okay, we'll do everything. So Biden was like, he put his hand up, we got the documents, 100% cooperate. Trump tries to hide the documents, moves the documents to another area, right? And he keeps obstructing everyone. That's what he did that was wrong. having it was not good. Obviously, Biden did the same. I think other people have done that. But they're trying to pretend like you don't have them and hide them. That was the crime. But here's the catch. When you have people who are not following politics properly, all they hear is Biden did it and Trump did it. Marnie, a lot of people in America are like toddlers and need to be constantly entertained, and they enjoy the Trump shit show. They're addicted to the hate. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I think the number one entertainment in America is politics, right? From the MAGA side. They look at it, they don't care as much about policy, and they care more about Trump owning the libs, Trump, saying stupid stuff, Trump, all that stuff. It's childish stuff, right? But going back to the documents case again, it's like it's obvious what the truth was. They were two very different things. But again, if you're not following politics closely, this is what I think a lot of them think. They're both as bad as each other, right? I'm not talking about the base things that they just think Trump's God. But some of the people who ended up voting for Trump because they thought he might be better with the economy, right? They were thinking, a lot of people go, "What, Melissa? My daughter has a friend that voted for Trump. She asked him, how could you vote for Trump after January 6th? He didn't know what it was. They're 26 years old." Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Marnie. Yeah, exactly. A lot of them don't know about this stuff. Honestly, a lot of them do not know about any of this stuff at all. When I'm on Twitter talking to Americans, I probably talk to way too much MAGA. Even on Substack, I argue with them all the time. And a lot of people are like, why do it? I don't know. I can't help myself, right? But I do find that whenever I talk to them, right, is that I'm shocked at how much they don't know. Really basic stuff. Like the reason they think this is, and some of it makes you laugh, right? They don't know. They don't want to know. Yeah. But some of them will be like, when Trump said they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, right? And I'll say to them, what's your evidence for that? Because he doesn't backtrack on it. He doubles down on it. He just kept right. And all the people that I talk to on Twitter will say, yeah, but he was right. And I'll go, okay, how was he right? And they'll go, well, there's this. So basically what they do, it's quite fun. They share this picture online, right? And it's a picture of a black man with a duck. The duck looks dead, right? And nobody knows who this guy is. Like they admit they don't know who he is. We think we know he's in America somewhere. They don't know where he is, right? And he's not got a cat or a dog. He's got a duck. So that's the evidence they keep sending to me all the time. I see everywhere online. It's like, yeah, but this is it. So to put this right, Trump says that Haitians, not just are eating cats and dogs, right? And their evidence is a random black guy who they have no idea where he is in America. They have no idea if he's Haitian. And, I know, Sarah, they know he's Haitian. And he's carrying a duck, not a pet, not a cat or a dog. And that's the evidence. They will send that to me with like, ha, 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 gotcha. And I'm like, what? There's a random guy with a black and duck. They said, yeah, okay. He wasn't 100. Then they start conceding. He wasn't 100% right, but he was pretty close. And I'm like, no. Close would be an actual Haitian picture eating a cat or a dog, and you don't have any of that. That's not close. That's like, but again, you can't, like, I don't know why. It must make me crazy, like arguing with people, but they actually, they believe this stuff. They just believe, they don't actually believe the truth. And there was another one with, do you remember when Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband, was at home? They don't deal in facts. No, they don't deal in facts. Like, this is the other one that's crazy online. When Paul Pelosi was attacked with a hammer at his home, right? And this guy was basically, to give you, I don't know if you know, but the background is, this guy was a Canadian. Sorry, sir. Not Canadian, Washington, D.C. But any Canadians out there, I'm sorry. Okay. But this guy was Canadian, which means nothing. But he basically went down. What he'd been doing is been watching Mike Lindell, Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, who's basically destroyed his business because he fell for the election fraud thing. So he's been going around the country, Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, showing people videos of proof of the election was stolen, right? So he'd been watching a lot of those videos, right? So he got radicalized by the whole stolen election thing. And he also got radicalized by January 6th was Nancy Pelosi's fault, right? So he basically said, you know how like MAGA and Trump say that Nancy Pelosi didn't call, they didn't call the National Guard, all that. So it's Nancy Pelosi's fault for January 6th, right? So he fell for all that, right? And because he fell for all that, he got into it. He started sending threatening messages to to Nancy Pelosi on Facebook, and they were public, right? He's threatening her. So he went down there. He went to San Francisco, right? Stayed at some hostel, and then went to their house, found out where they lived, and then she wasn't home, so he attacked, right, Paul Pelosi with a hammer, kept him hostage. Now, this was like 11 o'clock at night, and he's like wearing underwear because he's an older man at 11 o'clock at night, right? So, of course, he's wearing underwear. Now, because they found out he was wearing underwear, the MAGA, Trump, and not only Trump, but even Elon Musk had tweeted out, this is just after Elon Musk tweeted out, after he just purchased Twitter, right? He tweeted out, there's a chance that this might be a gay relationship gone wrong, right? So the owner of Twitter, who just bought it, just tweeted that out to like hundreds of millions of people, right? And so the conspiracy was that Paul Pelosi was in a secret gay relationship with this guy and had gone bad, right? And to this day, they all believe it. They really, really all believe it, right? They still think that it's real, that actually did happen, right? And that's the craziness of this. They really do believe, and it doesn't matter how many years. And sometimes and there was a court case, and then during the court case, basically they found out, they went through all the information. They went through all his emails. They went through all his posts. So, and funny enough, during the whole court case, nobody mentioned a gay relationship, right? So it's all public, the court case, everything, right? But they still believe, 99% of them still believe that it was a gay thing gone wrong. And then when I tell them and I show them the information about the court case, they're like, oh, well, I don't believe mainstream media. So you just can't win. I don't know why I put myself through it, but yeah, it's just crazy, crazy stuff all the time. They're constantly coming up with these ridiculous conspiracies all the time, this is why I think they're beyond reproach. When people believe like cats and dogs, or or the other one is when Trump said there's $50 million worth of condoms going to Hamas, and it was like Biden was putting it in, and then we found out later there was like a couple of hundred, bless you for trying to educate people. No, I think I must be a sadist, but I just think that they basically so when they found out it wasn't 50 million condoms, and they said no, it was actually a couple of $100,000, 100,000 of condoms going to I think it was Saudi Arabia, some other country outside of Hamas. And then again, it's like, well, yeah, but that's not $50 million worth of condoms going to Hamas. You're now trying to like use mental gymnastics to get out of it. And they're like, yeah, but so if there's like a 1% amount of truth to it, right? You know more about our politics in Aussie than half the American. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm obsessed with them. I don't know why I got into American politics so much, but yeah. I just think that, that says to me is that they will find the most granular proof of something, right? And then that's enough. Like black man with a duck somewhere in America, he was right about cats and dogs. That's enough, It wasn't perfect, but it's enough. He got you there. He just, as a black man with a duck, So, it's impossible to sort of push him in that way. And then, and so I don't know. That's why I think there's no chance with those people to, they've been radicalized probably by the internet. Some of them, strangely, will say to me they voted for Obama beforehand, which I always find a little bit strange. They said, I voted for Obama, and then I was woken up, and then I voted for Trump. Yeah. So, yeah, it's just the whole thing is just, constantly Aussies are great at calling out BS. Yeah, I think we just. I think it's also, Sarah. I think it's easier when you're good on. I think it's easier when you're in a different country and you're watching it from afar. Do you know what I mean? Because you're not as in. I'm invested in it because I don't want Trump to be president, and I don't like the idea of liberals over there or non-MAGA people being affected by it. But also, Trump impacts the rest of the world as well. It doesn't just impact America. America's the most powerful country on the planet. He's put tariffs on us and all that stuff. Everything that he does affects everybody because it's such a big country. But I think it's easier when you're in Australia because you have that. But culturally, you guys are straight. Yeah, we do. We don't. We are pretty straight shooters. We don't. We're not big into what never made it in Australia. Like motivational speakers like Tony Robbins and all that. Hey man, how you going? Hi, but that never really took off in Australia because we just found it a little bit fake. You know what I mean? Where you have that super motivational people, that. I'm not against it, but it doesn't feel real to us. So we had Tony Robbins come here and try to do a big thing, and it never really took off. What's interesting, a bit of a side thing, is Starbucks never took off in Australia. And it's one of the only countries in the world where Starbucks never took off. And they tried. They put a lot of money into trying to come here. And the reason is because Australia has a really big coffee culture, and we love our really good coffee. We make some of the best coffees in the world. And basically, the reason is because when we taste Starbucks, it's not like it's really bad, but it's not great coffee. It's like mass-produced coffee type of thing. In Australia, the most popular coffee shops are actually there's loads of individual coffee shops, right? So you go to a town, a city, and there'll be like 5, but they're not franchises or the same company. They're just individual people owned by individual people, right? They're individual owners, all different, right? Different, all that. They all have different coffee brands. They all have different foods. It's not the same thing. And that's the most popular thing in Australia. And that's one of the things I love about Australia is that, you don't just have one coffee. I mean, McDonald's coffee is a little bit popular in Australia, but only for people who are trying to go to work and you go through the drive-through. So it's more of a convenience thing. But if you have to actually go into the coffee shop, it's mom and pop shops. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's strange. And I remember the owner or the CEO of Starbucks saying, we just can't crack the Australian market, even though they're one of the biggest drinkers of coffee. So it's not that they can't get enough people to drink coffee, it's that we have everyone loves their little coffee shop. They make this particular brand or that particular brand. And people like trying different coffees all the time. They don't want to have the same one all the time. So I get really, I'm a real coffee drinker, and I'll get really bored of one coffee, then I have to have enough of something else and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a bit of a side thing. But I think that shows a little bit of differences in our culture from that sort of thing. So yeah, but otherwise we're very similar. We get a lot of your stuff. American movies are obviously the biggest thing in Australia. We don't get a lot of Australian movies here. American TV, like streaming services, the biggest thing here. A lot of American music. Sarah, independents and small chain coffee houses and shops are a thing in the Washington, D.C. area. Oh, cool. That's cool, Sarah. That's good to hear. Yeah. Yeah. Marnie, you just made me love Australians more. I have not gone to Starbucks in a long time. I make my own, or I only support better coffee at a local coffee shop. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I know. And look, I get that it's like maybe there's like a Starbucks everywhere, so it's like a convenience thing. I get that. But it's just nice to have like that, because I think you pay the same amount of money, because I went to a Starbucks in Sydney when I lived in Sydney, and I was right in the city, and I went and tried it. It wasn't cheaper than the coffee shops. So it's not like at least when you go to McDonald's coffee, right, the drive-through ones, it's convenient because you go for a drive-through. And secondly, it's cheaper. They make it much cheaper. But Starbucks, I found, was the same price as what you'd get at an independent coffee shop, and it tastes better at the independent coffee shop. So that's probably why it never took off, because it didn't have a price thing to go with it, And it almost, Starbucks tries to make itself, at least in Australia, as a premium brand, but we didn't see it as a premium. We saw it like as a franchise, like a big, so nothing beats a cozy independent coffee shop. Yeah, I love it. I have like 5 or 6 around where I live. Coffee shops are just, if you ever come to Australia, one of the things you'll notice is just how many coffee shops there are here. It's just, everywhere. Some of them are small, some of them are a little bit bigger. They do breakfast, all that sort of stuff. I have to be, Melissa, I agree. I have to be a bit careful because I'm a celiac, which means I can't eat gluten. So I have to be careful where I go to to eat food. I have to be like try to go gluten free places more so. But yeah, so 100%, yeah. And so so basically, I think that culture. I think the part of American culture that I've always loved is the people because whenever I met an American, I've always in Australia, I've always found them out to be super nice and super friendly and generally liberal. So I haven't met many MAGA people who travel. I don't think they travel as much, to be honest. Um, so in Australia, and they often say things like, "Yeah, don't blame me. I didn't vote for him." Like they say that a lot, right? They'll just say, "Don't blame me. I didn't vote for him." So yeah, and it's super, and I just find Americans really easy to talk to. I love American people like that. So yeah, I mean that's probably the reason why. But again, I think maybe I was thinking the other day maybe part of the reason why America seems to go towards authoritarianism more than say Australia is that is that I think because it's such a powerful country, you know what I mean? There's probably working class people at the bottom who are thinking, why aren't we taking advantage of being this really powerful country? Like, why aren't we like leveraging that to get more things for our people, that sort of thing. And I think that's part of the reason why Trump as well. It would be harder to have an authoritarian government. You could have it definitely in a place like say New Zealand, which is like a country near us, because they're not a very powerful country. They can't ask for a lot of the people, whatever. But yeah, I think I think personally, I think that I would like to see a Democrat who is not afraid to talk on any platform, not afraid to talk on YouTube. Someone like Pete Buttigieg, who goes on pretty much every platform. He goes on Fox News. He goes on Street. He goes, he'll go on Joe Rogan. He'll go anywhere. He'll go talk to anyone. You don't have to, but I think that helps because what I've noticed is when he goes on and talks on all these shows, is they actually like him. Yeah. There's always the argument of because he's gay, would that affect his vote, right? Would that, yeah, Melissa, I love you too. Yeah. Would that affect his vote in those Rust Belt states? I don't know that. I think it probably could. If they're not going to vote for a woman, they probably wouldn't vote for a gay guy. Yeah, he's a gifted communicator. Yeah, he's a great communicator. I saw him on this like show. It's a really popular show on YouTube, and it's like he's a friend of Joe Rogan. So he's in that sort of area, and he went on there. Andrew Schultz is his name. He's like a comedian. All those comedians now have their own podcast, but they all get like millions and millions of views. They're like really big, right? And he brought Pete Buttigieg on to talk, and you can go and watch it on YouTube, and it's like, wow, like you could just tell this guy voted for Trump, by the way. But you could just tell that he was calmly. He's so calm the way he talks, but he's so, as Sarah said, gifted at how he talks. They can't rattle Pete. One of my things I love, but yeah, they can't. And because he cut his teeth on Fox News. He's one of those people who's been going on Fox News, and also he represents an area that isn't full on Democrat. He represents an area that has, as he says himself, has a lot of Republicans, and he says that he's around, right? He's around a lot of Republicans, right? And when you're like that, when you're like that, it's easier to talk to those people. Like I find it, even with me when I talk to, because I talk to a lot of people, a lot of MAGA people on Twitter and a Substack. I find it quite easy to communicate with them in a way, as much as they annoy me, because I know them. I know what they're watching. I hear them all the time. I know their point of view of everything. So it's easier for me to communicate with them. And there've even been cases where I've been talking to someone on Twitter. Yeah, he's a true Midwesterner. He is. He's like, yeah. But again, I wish he could win, but have people who said maybe because he's gay, he wouldn't win that area. But if there's anybody who could win and be gay, it would be him. Like he would be like, yeah, because he wouldn't just be in Los Angeles or New York. I think if he ran for election, he would purposely go to the places where they would expect him to go the least, right? He would go take me to Joe Rogan, take me to all these YouTubers, who were like, sympathetic to MAGA. I want to go on all of them. Put me on Fox News, I don't care. He will say yes to everything. And there will be a part of those people, not most of them, who will go, you know what? I respect him for doing that. It's hard not to respect somebody to go into an area, right, that is not your home area, right? And I think that's why he gets respect in that area. And so, and then if maybe he had I don't know, like a VP who was maybe, I don't know, how it goes. He was that if he was the president running for president, and then his VP was a female. I mean, I'd love to see that, but I don't know in America if that would actually happen. We've had a female prime minister, which is like the president over there in Australia, a woman called Julia Gillard, right? In Australia, we've only had one, and yeah, she was pretty popular, but she did cop a lot from those far right wing people, yeah, and some of them called her like a witch and things like that. So did get quite personal there for a while. This is like 15 years ago, so it was a while ago. So I do think it's easier to be a female in a right wing party than it is in a left wing party. Like if you look at Margaret Thatcher, right? We're talking about the 70s and 80s, and she was the English prime minister, and she's a hero to conservatives, not just in England, but in America. Everyone talks because that was a woman in power in the 80s, right? But that's what I think it takes. Even that was that long ago. It feels like we haven't gone that much further. Although in Europe, there's a lot of female leaders in Europe. Yeah, so it's a lot more than. But even in England, there hasn't been that many more. There was one more after that, but she was actually the Iron Lady. That's right. Yeah. But see, the thing is, Sarah, I think she someone like that could win in America because she came across as more macho than most of the guys. If you watch her in the 70s, watch how she talked. She was very tough. She was like very strong. And she was constantly, so they couldn't pin her as being, too weak or something. And also she's in the Conservative Party, right? So American men would rather trust a liberal woman. Yeah. Yeah. Right. She was seen as Reagan. Yeah, she was. She was seen like a female version of Reagan, sadly. Yeah. Yeah. Would never trust yeah, that's right. Yeah. She was seen as a female woman. Reagan's equal. Yeah. So in America, you would have to have someone like Margaret Thatcher to win. I could totally see a Republican, right, winning the election, like because because the left wing people are not going to vote. So not left wing, but independents or moderates are not going to vote for her because she's female, right? But a lot of Republicans would still vote for her, even if they preferred a male, because if she comes across as like a Reagan type figure, they'll overlook that because they'd rather vote for that than a centre left person. So they're still getting the right vote. They can get the moderates, right? And then the left's not going to attack us for being female. So she kind of gets off scot-free if you're a right wing Republican. But if you're a left wing, you'll get attacked for being a woman. You'll get called DEI. Absolutely, you'll get called DEI. I mean, Kamala Harris was a vice president. She got called DEI. Like, anybody black or anybody female is DEI. In the Trump world, right? If only, like AOC, exactly, yeah. Or with AOC, because she worked in a bar, right, when she was younger, they say she's always drunk, right? The interesting thing is the MAGA movement loves to say, right, that they're like the working class party, but when you have someone like AOC or Tim Walz, right, who was a teacher and actually doesn't have a lot of money, he's not rich or anything like a lot of other leaders, they made fun of them for being that. They made fun of Tim because he didn't have that much money. They made fun of AOC because she came from like working in a bar, right? And yet they will go, you can't trust the Pelosi's because they're buying all these shares. Like they're the Democrats are cool, they're buying shares or something. They're all hypocrites about it. Yeah, when it comes to MAGA, every accusation is a confession. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but I just think every single time, they do that. They try to play both games, and then they like with Trump, right? that's the person that they trust with working class people. Someone who ripped people off all the time, who started Trump University, which is basically, you know, not actually a university, and he had to close it down because the judge called it a scam, right? That's the person they trust. And, Steve Bannon, who's like one of the top leaders, one of his friends, right, set up a GoFundMe thing, right? And it was to build a wall. And he was asking for money off Trump supporters, right? And so Trump supporters gave this GoFundMe thing to build a wall to Steve Bannon, Trump's good mate. And he was later sued in court and found guilty, not just sued, but found guilty criminal charges of fraud. He took $1 million away from Trump supporters. So Steve Bannon, right, get this right, Steve Bannon, Trump's best mate, steals money from Trump supporters, and then Trump, he gets sentenced to jail, and Trump's pardons him. And by the way, his Steve Bannon is still popular within the MAGA movement. And the fact that Trump pardoned someone who stole from like MAGA, they don't care, or they don't believe it, So, I mean, you can't help people who don't want to help themselves. Make it make sense, Joe. Trump wouldn't spit on most. Yeah, yeah, I know. Like, I wrote this article on Substack newsletter, and it basically said nobody hates the MAGA base more than Trump, and it's true. They hate like, as much as we despise them. I think they hate him more. I really do. I think Trump and the people like Steve Bannon around him, they actually have contempt for those people, because we don't hate those people because they're poor or they're working class. We don't like them because of the shit they say and the fact they're supporting Trump. They don't like him because they think they're suckers. They think that, Trump would never socialize with these people. He was socializing with Epstein and, partying, being a socialite in New York. Could you imagine Trump actually socializing with like working class MAGA people? But again, someone like Tim Walz, who was way closer to that, was like, he's not authentic. They were saying Tim Walz, who's like a school teacher who barely owned any property, had no shares, right, was probably one of the poorest people to ever run in a long time. And they're like, he's unauthentic. Yeah. But Trump is authentic. Republican leaders and voters have a serious morality problem. Yeah. Yeah. I just think that they don't really think things through very much. They just see things like, I don't know, they see things as like anti-establishment, anti-deep state, anything to blow up the system. And I just think that they've come in, and because of that, in a way, right, it's made Democrats more establishment. Because if you're fighting against someone like Trump, right, who wants to dismantle Medicaid, right, or defund Medicaid, or make it harder for people to get, right, or take away other government things, like there was a fraud, Sarah Anand Greenidanides, I don't know, here on Substack, has said something similar about Trump having contempt for his base. Yeah. I said it better though, Sarah. I don't know, not joking. But yeah, I've always thought that, and thank you, love heart. But yeah, he basically, I think the contempt that they have for their base is like on a level. They said Walz would have been poorest vice president ever. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. But yeah, he basically, he would have been. And it was funny because Democrats were trying to show that as a positive, and you would think Republicans would see Tim being one of the poorest, as a positive, but instead they turned it around and said, well, why would you trust someone who has no money? Why would you trust someone like that to run your business or, run the government? And that's like, you can't, well, okay, so then Nancy Pelosi and her husband, Paul Pelosi, making millions from shares, right? That should be a good thing for MAGA then, because that shows they're really good business people, right? But they have this conflicting thing, right? Where it's like, if you're someone like Tim or AOC and you are actually working class, then you're not good enough, right? Because you don't have, you don't make enough money. But if you're someone like Nancy Pelosi, who's made a lot of money through her husband's actually a startup basically he's basically a stock market guy. He pumps a lot. He's always been an IT economics guy. Entrepreneur. This isn't like he's not making a lot of money because um, he's getting inside information from Nancy Pelosi. He's making a lot of money because he's been in that IT industry and the tech industry for years and years. He was making money beforehand, right? So, but they make that that thing, that connection between you can't trust them, so you can't win either way. And then with Trump, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever he has, and then they're like, well, that's a positive. Okay, well then you can't complain when a Democrat has money as well, right? So that's constant. They're constantly just being so hypocritical about everything they say. And I don't know. I don't know at this stage um, how you can get through it, but I do think you can get. I think there is a group in the middle of Republicans that you can actually get through. Not MAGA, but actual like moderates and stuff that you can probably get through to. And I think a good Democratic candidate could actually cut through to those people, and somebody who is who can just talk for a long time. Yeah, yeah. There is no internal consistency to their arguments. It's just about hate. Yeah, it's all about owning the libs and hating the libs. That's and hating Democrats. That's all it's about. Yeah, and they would be willing to vote if they saw. I really do think this. If a MAGA person saw, right, that Democrats brought in a policy and they owned a business, right, a small business, and Democrats brought in a policy that was good for their business, that was actually going to be a positive thing for their business, and then Trump was like, I'm gonna make it harder for that business. I think they'd still vote for Trump. I think they would vote against their own economic, um, life. They just because they want to vote for Trump. Yeah, because a lot of times, if you say to them, well, who's better with Medicaid? I lost sound. Anyone else? Oh, can anyone else hear me? Hello? Yep. Melissa, can you hear me still? Can anyone else hear me? There is no, yeah. No, I didn't, Melissa. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you can still hear me? Good, good. Sorry, Melissa. Okay, just me. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I think I hear you. Volume is a little low. Oh, is that better? Sarah, does that sound a bit better or not? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So basically, I just think that I think a lot of that. I think a lot of that stuff. I hear you fine. Yeah. I think a lot of that stuff is, I would love to see better. Yes, excellent. I'd love to see a Democrat who's uh, someone's like Pete Buttigieg, right? But is maybe going to be a little bit more um, acceptable in that area. The funny thing is, I did think about this. I think Joe Biden, without the decline, would have been the best person to beat Trump in 2024 because those people in those Rust Belt states, they actually liked Joe Biden. He was, he comes from those areas like Pennsylvania and all that stuff. He's that type of person. So I believe Biden had what happened to him not happened. He could have beat him. I think Biden from 2020 or Biden from 2016 would have. I'm not 100% sure he would have won, but he would have been very, very close. Yeah. Because I think the post-COVID inflation thing was a hard thing to get over because, as I said, countries all over the world were getting kicked out from being incumbents. So, but either way, it would have been a lot closer if Joe Biden, and that's the irony of it, because he was the best candidate because he's on the one hand, think about it, Joe Biden is an old white dude from the Rust Belt state. Like he just ticks all the boxes of someone who's going to win. He's not politically correct. He says he says stuff that people are like, oh, he's about to say something right, So he does attract a lot of those people who like him. You know what I mean? So I can totally see why people voted for him in 2020. Here's the other thing I want to say about Biden's decline and stuff like that. A lot of Republicans will say that they'll say things like the election was stolen in 2020 And their proof for that is that how is it possible that Biden could have got, I think, 81 million votes? How could he have got 81 million votes for someone who is like, declining, like, right? What they leave out of that, what they leave out of that is the fact that if you look at, they will show you a clip of Biden at the debate in 2024. What they will not show you, right? Thank you for the love hearts. Thank you. um, what they would not show you is Biden in 2020 debating Trump. Because I went back after that horrible debate in 2024. And I was like, this is not Joe Biden that I remember. So I went back to 2020. I watched all his debates, and he was amazing. In fact, Fox News said he won the one on his one. That's how good he was. Nobody was talking about decline in those debates, right? So he was a very, very different Joe Biden even 4 years earlier when he was going up against Trump the first time. So when they say that, when they say the election was stolen, my proof is because look at Joe. Are you telling me this Joe Biden on the debate could have been Trump? Well, wait a sec. That's not I'm a great heart smasher. Oh, thank you, Barney. Thank you. Oh, yeah. But it just basically it makes me think like again. I don't know whether they're doing it on purpose or they're just really or they're just repeating things other people say. But how is it possible that they will just show you that clip of the debate? And I'll say to them, well, have you seen, you're saying he didn't win the 2020 election because of the way he is in 2024, but show me a clip from the debate in 2020 where he was like 2024 and they won't show it, right? They can't show it because it didn't exist. There was nothing in any of those debates, not even one bit in any of the 2020 debates with Joe Biden and Trump where he did any of that. In fact, he did pretty well. So again, their whole rationale for Trump won the 2020 election because how could Biden have won that is based on comparing Biden from 2024 to Biden to making him out to be back like he was in 2020. So, again, none of their arguments make any sense. And one of the reasons I do like debating MAGA is because it makes you feel smart. I'm just going to say it does. It makes you feel really smart because I know because I absorb what they absorb and I know the actual facts, it makes you feel quite intelligent. And even if you're not that intelligent, it makes you feel that intelligent. So MAGA is great for your self-confidence. That's all I can say. It's really good for your self-confidence. So I encourage people, just on occasion, if you're feeling, you're not feeling great about yourself or something like that, you're feeling like you could be a little bit smart, go and talk to them. You will feel like you are Albert Einstein after about 5 minutes. You will just feel like, oh my God, I am the smartest person on the planet. Just don't think about who you're talking to. Don't think about who you're comparing yourself with, okay? But they can make you feel, I'm concerned, and I hope this happens. I hope Trump loses or he goes away. The downside for me will be I might have to debate normal Republicans. And that might be a little bit, just normal everyday Republicans who aren't like, who aren't like this. And that's going to be, I'm not looking forward. I mean, I want it to happen, but it's not going to be the same. I like it when they show me a picture of like a black man with a duck as a reason that eating cats and dogs. That makes me feel happy. You know what I mean? Because I just think, yeah, this is so easy. I mean, this is Paul Pelosi, all that, the condoms thing, all that sort of stuff. They can make a person feel good. In fact, I've thought about actually an Australian program for young people who are experiencing problems with confidence levels as teenagers and encouraging them to just go on Twitter. Not all the time, because it's not a good thing to go on Twitter, and just have a chat. Just speak to one of them and get them to explain to you, right, why they lost why they won the 2020 election. Yeah. Get them to explain to you. One of the things I love to do is I'll often ask a MAGA person is, do you think tariffs are good or bad? And a lot of times they find that a hard question to answer because the reason they find that a hard question to answer is because Trump always goes back and forwards and they just regurgitate what Trump says. So they will say, like, when Trump was first saying tariffs are the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my life. They're just the most amazing things I've ever seen, right? They're going to save our country. They're going to give us lots of taxes, and other countries are going to pay for it. Other countries are going to pay for the tariffs, right? So he was saying this all the time, right? And then, right? And then when Walmart said, well, these tariffs are going to cost us a lot of money because we have to pay for them, right? So we're going to have to increase the prices. And then Trump tweets out, Walmart and other companies should eat the tariffs. So now there's a conflicting story here, right? There's one is the other countries are paying for it, and the other one is Trump's asking the American companies to eat the tariffs. So which one is it? When I'm feeling like in a bit of a mood, I will go on Twitter and I'll find these people and I'll just say, look, what do you think of, what's your views on tariffs? And a lot of times they're conflicted about it, right? And they won't answer. They just go away. They disappear. Or they'll say like, well, tariffs are good and they're also bad. I said, give me an example of a good tariff, on say like, who do you think pays for those tariffs? The other country pays for those tariffs. That's what I say. Okay, cool. So why did he say the Walmart were going to should eat the tariffs? Oh, well, and that they go away. Unfortunately, they disappear. I would love them to engage a little bit more. So it's always good to, find out, what their views are on these things. Trump makes their life hell. He really does, because he conflicts. He completely will say one thing one day, and they will say the same thing. They'll regurgitate that blindly. And the next day he'll reverse that. And then they have to reverse that again. It's like mental gymnastics. It's like they're constantly having to keep up with what Trump is saying. And sometimes they haven't caught up with what he's saying. And they will tell you his first version of what Trump said. And I said, well, actually, Trump said this today. And I go, oh, well, yeah, well, in that case, I would go, yeah, of course you would. Of course you would. Yeah. And sometimes I think what they do is they go to find his Truth Social and they'll find out what he's saying. And then they'll just tell you what he said. And sometimes it's not even word for word like what he's saying. So, you can have a bit of fun, during this period. They are good for your confidence, but it is, I'm certainly not saying he should be in power. I think I would love to see him not go. It would be nice to see a Republican Party who's not as nutty as this guy is. It'd be nice to see America going through a stable period, of none of this stuff. I'd love to see Jay Ray's LA. You just reminded me that I just had a conversation with my cousin and told her he's not a good business. Bankrupt 6 times. They argue Trump is a businessman, and he intentionally bankrupt. That's what rich people do. Yeah. There's always they can do the mental gymnastics for the craziest things. I know, it's crazy. It doesn't matter. But it is fun to just try to, like, what you can see the clocks, the things moving around their head. Sarah, there is no critical thinking. They just regurgitate Trump's. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They do. They would just repeat the same thing, or they would just say things like, sometimes like on Twitter, they will say, oh, the reason I voted for Trump is because he's honest. I've actually, like, that's a bizarre thing for me to hear people say. Joe Rogan, after he voted for Trump, he endorsed Trump and voted for him. This is probably the craziest thing I've ever heard. He said, the reason I voted, after I heard Tim Walz, how there was a whole Tim Walz thing where he was basically saying, Fox News, and that was saying that he was lying about his service, that he didn't do proper service, all that sort of stuff, like he wasn't properly in the army, and then he exaggerated and all that stuff. Anyway, Joe Rogan basically said, one of the reasons I voted for Trump is because I couldn't take the lies from Tim Walz. Yeah. You're voting for the biggest liar to ever hold office. You're voting for that guy because you thought Tim Walz exaggerated stuff about his military or something. And He's ignoring the thousands of lies from Donald Trump. And that's one of the reasons why he voted for Donald Trump. Yeah. Again, like it's, you could say Joe Rogan doesn't matter, but it does matter in a way because he has such a massive audience, right? And it's not just the audience that he has, is that he's created this ecosystem around himself, right? Of other comedians who have podcasts. And these other comedians who have podcasts get millions. We're talking like if you President Bone Spurs, but can't remember which Bone Spur is on. That's right. I know. He, like Tim Walz actually was in the military. Trump wasn't, but Biden gives more credit to Trump, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's just constant lies, from these people and people like Joe Rogan who've built this massive, ecosystem around here with podcasters or who get extraordinary views. If you compare their views to CNN or even Fox News, it's through the roof. Like, it's just insane. Like, some of them get 20, 30 million. Now, some of these people are watching it from Australia or, other overseas, because a lot of these people, like Joe Rogan's big in Australia, he's big in Europe amongst young people, that sort of stuff. So he's not just big in America. I'm sure he's probably big in Canada as well amongst young people. But yeah, they do have a lot of influence. And if you look at how young people voted in the 2024 election, there's never been so many young people vote conservative. I think it's the biggest conservative vote in a long time, or maybe the biggest. And there's no doubt about it. It's because they were all endorsing him, and he was going on all their shows. He went on, the Joe Rogan, but he went on all these other shows as well. And he picked up all those, people, and they're not just 20. We're not talking about people in the teenage 20s. Some of these are big fan bases under 40. So you're picking up a lot of these people. A lot of young men like Rogan, I'll never understand. Yeah, I know. And like, if you want to watch him because you like UFC or something, that's fine. But to get your politics from him, it just, he even says like, I'm stupid when it comes to politics, right? I'm stupid when it comes to science. And yet, this is one of the other things that I find interesting about this whole Trump this MAGA uniform, right? Is they basically they have this like ridiculous anti-science thing, but they pretend like it's not anti-science. They pretend like they try to make it out like conventional scientists, right, are arrogant, right? So a lot of times that if like for example Fauci or someone in the CDC or someone like that, they say something and they'll go, he just sounds really arrogant. Yeah, he's really arrogant. I can't believe how arrogant he is. He just thinks he's so good, He said I'm science and all that. So anybody who's like part of that world is like arrogant, right? Now, I find that interesting because the people that they support, right, are the people in the minority in the scientific world. Like people like RFK Jr., right, who he's for as well. Their views on science is not shared by 99.9. Well, almost midnight here, heading to bed now. Oh, thanks, Joe. See you, Melissa. I'm going to head off soon too, by the way. But basically, they keep saying this as well. They keep saying like that they're anti-establishment, but these people think that they're arrogant. I think the arrogant people are people like RFK Jr. and Joe Rogan, and I just think, and the reason I think that is if you're Joe Rogan, right, and you say to everybody, I'm not that smart, I don't know much about science, right, or you're someone like that, right? Rogan pushes ancient aliens BS, drives the serious archaeology world crazy. They have to spend so much time. But yeah, exactly, exactly, T. And he pushes the 1% or the 0.1% of people in that area who think that. Or sometimes they're not even in that area. They're like hobbyists or something. They're just people who talk about it, but not experts, right? Now, why I think they've got the whole arrogance thing the wrong way around is if Joe Rogan thinks people like Fauci are arrogant, right? He's saying that, he's not arrogant. But Joe Rogan is arrogant because if you are aware that you're not an expert in an area and you have 5,000 doctors telling you one thing and then one telling you the other, and then you go with the one telling you the other, that's arrogant, right? Because you think you know better than the 4,909 other ones, right? You're putting yourself above all those. RFK's James so dangerous. He's going to kill a lot. Yeah, exactly, Marty. Is and you're basically saying I'm going with that 1 out of 5,000, right? And therefore, I'm going to give that person a platform, right? I'm going to let that person spew whatever they want, right? And but why are you giving that person a platform, and why are you giving the people who hold the 99% of that view, the opposite view, a platform as well? And that's because he personally believes their idea, right? Which is arrogant because how can you call Fauci arrogant, right? When Fauci's actually an expert in that area, and yet you think you're better than all these other people, and that's the crazy thing. They are actually the arrogant ones that they feel that they will just take the contrarian view, that 1% of that one person, who doesn't believe that stuff. RFK Jr. today basically went even crazy again. He's getting rid of a panel of vaccine experts at the CDC, right? That's like these are experts in the on how to check for whether they're safe and effectiveness, all that. He got rid of that panel today on the CDC. Yeah, the whole panel. He got rid of the whole thing. They fired them all. Yeah. So this is like, again, Trump's world is basically turning America dumb, turning America into assholes, and it's basically going back to the dark ages. It really feels like we had the Enlightenment, and now we're going to, you know what? We had great time. Let's go back to the dark ages. Measles should not be making a comeback in America, but also, but it's dumped in these ignorant. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I have to go now. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Marnie, all the other people, Sarah, everyone who commented. Thank you so much. I really enjoy this. Is Jude not dumped? Yeah, yeah. I really enjoy doing this. I'm going to do another one again soon. Please subscribe to my newsletter, the Joe Thomas newsletter, if you can. That'll be awesome. Thank you so much. Big goodbyes. See you, Sarah. Thank you so much for the chat. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Paolo. Thank you. I've seen some names there from the other day. Thank you, Paolo. Thanks, guys.